The blazing Arizona sun hung like a copper penny over Cactus Ridge Ranch when she first appeared on the horizon. A mysterious silhouette against the endless sky, she walked slowly toward the property, one hand holding the reins of a magnificent dapple-gray Andalusian stallion that moved with surprising grace for its massive size. The ranch owner, watching from the fence line, felt something stir in his chest as the woman approached, something he thought had died along with his dreams years ago. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Miles Blackwood hammered the last nail into the water trough he was repairing when he spotted her approaching. 34 years of hard living and disappointment had weathered his face and hardened his heart. The Arizona desert was unforgiving to dreamers, and Miles had long ago stopped being one. He straightened up, squinting against the harsh sunlight, watching as she approached with deliberate steps. The stallion beside her was a sight to behold, powerful muscles rippling beneath a silver-gray coat that caught the light like polished metal. What struck Miles most was how calm the animal seemed, occasionally lowering its massive head to nuzzle the woman's shoulder with surprising gentleness. "Afternoon," she called out, her voice carrying a slight accent he couldn't quite place. "I heard you might need help with your horses." Miles set down his hammer and crossed his arms, leaning against the fence post. His eyes, narrowed from years squinting against the desert sun, studied her with practiced caution. Strangers rarely brought good news to Cactus Ridge. "Who told you that?" he asked, his voice rough from disuse. The nearest town was 15 miles east, and Miles hadn't been there in weeks. "Man at the trading post." She stopped a respectful distance away, giving him space. Smart, he thought. "Said, you lost your horse trainer last month, and your foreman before that." "And you think you can replace them?" Miles asked, his tone skeptical as he studied her more closely. She was younger than he'd first thought, maybe early 30s. Delicate features weathered by sun and wind, but her eyes held a quiet determination that suggested she was tougher than she looked. "I know I can," she replied without hesitation, meeting his gaze directly. "I've worked with problem horses all my life." As if on cue, the stallion behind her snorted and pawed at the ground, sending dust swirling in the late afternoon light. Miles glanced at the animal, noting its muscular build and unusually alert eyes. Most horses showed signs of weariness after traveling in this heat. This one looked ready to run another 20 miles. "That's Tempest," she said, following his gaze. "Everyone said he was unrideable, too wild, too dangerous." "Seems calm enough now," Miles observed, trying to sound unimpressed. A slight smile touched her lips. "Took 6 months, but we understand each other now." Miles looked past her toward the distant hills, considering his options. His ranch was struggling. After his brother Daniel's death last year, he'd taken on full responsibility for Cactus Ridge, including the horse breeding program they'd started together. The previous trainer had left without notice, taking 2 ranch hands with him to work for the Sanderson spread with its bigger paycheck and newer facilities. He needed help, that much was certain, but trust didn't come easily in these parts, especially to a man who'd seen the worst of human nature. "What's your name?" he finally asked, breaking the silence that had stretched between them. "Elena. Elena Diaz." "Where are you staying, Elena Diaz?" Her expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes, a vulnerability quickly masked. "Nowhere yet. Just arrived in the area yesterday." Miles studied her again, taking in her worn boots, the simple pack tied to her saddle. All her worldly possessions, it seemed. Then he looked at the stallion. The animal was watching him with intelligent eyes, ears forward, interested but not afraid. A memory surfaced, his brother Daniel's voice. "A horse knows. They can sense a person's true nature better than any man." It had been Daniel's philosophy and training, in life. Miles had always been the practical one, the skeptic. But now, "Got a small cabin behind the stables," he said finally, the words surprising him almost as much as they seemed to surprise her. "Nothing fancy. Roof leaks when it rains hard." Hope brightened her face before she carefully masked it with composure. "You're offering me work?" "I'm offering you a chance," Miles corrected, feeling the need to clarify. "Stay if that horse trusts you." "Tempest, was it?" "If he trusts you, that says something about your character." He gestured toward the main house with a jerk of his chin. "We can discuss terms in the morning. Storm's coming tonight anyway." Elena patted Tempest's neck, whispering something to him in Spanish. The horse nickered softly in response. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood." "Miles," he corrected, already turning away. "Stable's got an empty stall for your horse. Kitchen's got leftover stew if you're hungry. Help yourself." As they walked toward the ranch buildings, the first rumble of thunder echoed across the valley. The air had grown heavier, charged with the promise of rain. Miles glanced at the woman beside him, wondering what storms had driven her to his door and why, despite all reason, he was letting her in. Elena took in the ranch as they approached. A sprawling main house built of adobe and wood, a large barn, stables, and several smaller outbuildings. Despite signs of neglect, peeling paint, a sagging fence line, weeds creeping up around the corners, there was something solid about the place, something that had endured. Like its owner, she thought, stealing a glance at the tall, broad-shouldered man walking silently beside her. His face was all hard angles, tanned by years under the Arizona sun, with deep lines around his eyes and mouth. Not from smiling, she guessed, but from squinting against sun and sorrow. "You can put your horse there," Miles said, pointing to the stables. "Second stall on the left is empty. Feed's in the barrel by the door." Elena nodded, leading Tempest toward the indicated building. The stallion followed willingly, trusting her guidance. Inside, the stable was clean and well organized, even if the wood was weathered and the hinges rusty. Someone cared about these animals, despite the ranch's obvious struggles. After settling Tempest with fresh water and feed, Elena grabbed her small pack and followed Miles to a cabin set back behind the stables. It was small, just one room with a narrow bed, a table with 2 chairs, and a pot-bellied stove in the corner. A basin and pitcher stood on a small stand beneath a cracked mirror. "Outhouse is out back," Miles said, standing in the doorway. "Pump's over there for water." He pointed to a well pump about 20 yards away. "It's not much, but it's dry." "It's perfect," Elena said quietly, meaning it. She'd slept in far worse places over the years. Miles nodded, seemingly uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Kitchen door's unlocked if you want that stew. I'll be in the main house if you need anything else." Before she could thank him again, he was gone. Striding back toward the main house with long, purposeful steps, Elena set her pack on the bed and looked around the small space that would be her home, at least for tonight. The worn quilt on the bed was clean, the floor swept. Someone had placed a small vase of desert wildflowers on the table, a touch that seemed at odds with Miles Blackwood's gruff demeanor. As she unpacked her few belongings, the skies opened up. Rain drummed against the roof, finding the leak Miles had mentioned. Elena placed her metal cup under the steady drip and smiled. There was something comforting about the rhythm of raindrops, like nature's heartbeat. Her stomach growled, reminding her that she hadn't eaten since early morning. Pulling a shawl over her head against the rain, she dashed toward the main house, following Miles, directions to the kitchen door at the back. The kitchen was warm and surprisingly homey. A pot of stew simmered on the old cast-iron stove, filling the air with the rich scent of beef and herbs. Elena ladled some into a bowl she found on the shelf and sat at the worn wooden table to eat. "He doesn't usually take to strangers." Elena started at the voice, nearly dropping her spoon. An older woman stood in the doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Her gray hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her face, though lined with age, held a kind expression. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to intrude. Mr. Blackwood, Miles, said I could help myself to the stew." The woman smiled. "No intrusion at all. I'm Martha. I cook and keep house for Miles." She moved to the stove and stirred the pot. "I meant Miles doesn't usually take to strangers, letting you stay, offering work. That's not like him these days." Elena took another spoonful of stew, savoring the rich flavor. "The work is just a chance. He said we'd discuss terms tomorrow." Martha chuckled. "That's Miles for you. Cautious to a fault." She sat down across from Elena. "But that horse of yours must have impressed him. Miles believes horses are better judges of character than people." "Tempest has good instincts," Elena agreed. "He was wild when I found him, but we learned to trust each other." "Trust," Martha repeated thoughtfully. "That's in short supply around here these days. Has been since Daniel died." Elena set down her spoon. "Daniel? Miles' younger brother. They built this place together." Martha's eyes grew distant with memory. Daniel was the heart of Cactus Ridge, always laughing, dreaming up new ideas. Miles was the practical one, keeping those dreams grounded. They balanced each other. "What happened to him?" Elena asked softly. "Accident during a roundup last year. Horse spooked. Threw him into a ravine." Martha sighed heavily. "Miles hasn't been the same since. Blames himself, though nobody else does." The rain pounded harder against the roof, punctuating the silence that followed. Elena finished her stew, thinking about the man who had given her shelter. Grief could change a person, reshape them into someone unrecognizable. She knew that all too well. "Your room all right?" Martha asked, changing the subject. "That cabin hasn't been used in months." "It's fine, thank you," Elena smiled. "I noticed the flowers." Martha's eyes twinkled. "Thought they might brighten the place up. Miles would roll his eyes if he knew. Says I fuss too much." "They're lovely," Elena assured her, rising to rinse her bowl at the sink. "I should get back before the rain gets worse." "Take this." Martha wrapped a piece of fresh-baked bread in a cloth. "For breakfast. Miles is an early riser. He'll want to see what you can do with horses first thing." Elena accepted the bread gratefully. "I'll be ready." Dashing back through the rain, Elena found Tempest restless in his stall. The thunder had unsettled him, bringing back memories of the storm they'd weathered together in the mountains months ago. She spent time soothing him, stroking his neck and murmuring reassurances until he calmed. "We'll be all right here," she told him, pressing her forehead against his. "Just for a little while." Back in her cabin, Elena changed into dry clothes and settled on the bed, listening to the storm. The roof leak had grown worse, requiring a second cup to catch the water. Tomorrow would test whether she stayed or moved on, a pattern she'd grown too familiar with over the years. But something about this place, about Miles Blackwood with his gruff manner and sad eyes, made her hope this time might be different. Morning arrived with the smell of rain-soaked earth and desert blooms. Elena woke before dawn, having slept better than she expected on the narrow bed. Through the small window, she could see the sky lightening to a pale lavender, promising a clear day after the storm. She dressed quickly in her cleanest jeans and a simple shirt, pulling her long, dark hair into a practical braid. Today would determine her future, at least for now. Outside, the world felt renewed by the rain. Puddles reflected the brightening sky, and the air held a freshness that would burn away once the sun climbed higher. Ranch hands were already moving about their morning chores, giving her curious glances as she made her way to the stables. Tempest greeted her with a soft nicker, pushing his nose against her shoulder in greeting. She took extra time grooming him, wanting him to look his best today. As she worked, she spoke to him softly in Spanish, the language of her childhood, sharing her hopes and fears as she had done countless times before. "Buenos dias." Elena turned to find Miles standing in the stable doorway, watching her. He looked as though he hadn't slept well, shadows under his eyes more pronounced in the early light. "Good morning," she replied, continuing to brush Tempest's coat. "He likes to be presentable." A ghost of a smile touched Miles' lips. "Vain, is he?" "Dignified," Elena corrected, patting the horse's neck. "There's a difference." Miles stepped into the stable, moving with the careful confidence of someone accustomed to being around large animals. Tempest watched him approach but didn't shy away. "You speak Spanish to him," Miles observed. Elena nodded. "It's what my father spoke to his horses. Said they understand the feeling behind the words more than the words themselves." "Your father taught you about horses?" "Everything I know." Elena kept her voice neutral, not wanting to invite further questions about her past. Not yet. Miles seemed to sense her reluctance and changed direction. "I need to see what you can do. We've got a mare causing trouble. Won't let anyone near her since she foaled 3 weeks ago. Previous trainer couldn't get within 10 feet without her charging." "I'd like to try," Elena said, meeting his gaze. "Could be dangerous." She smiled slightly. "Most worthwhile things are." Something shifted in Miles' expression. A flicker of surprise, perhaps respect. "Have breakfast first. Martha will have something ready in the kitchen. Then meet me at the North Corral." After a quick breakfast of Martha's fresh bread and strong coffee, Elena found Miles waiting at a small corral set apart from the main pastures. Inside, a beautiful Palomino mare paced nervously, her golden coat gleaming in the morning sun. In the corner of the enclosure, a small foal watched with wide, curious eyes. "That's Duchess," Miles said as Elena approached. "Best mare we've got for breeding. Gentle temperament, until she foaled. Now she won't let anyone near her or the colt. Can't check them over, can't move them to better pasture." Elena studied the mare, noting the way she positioned herself between the humans and her foal. "She's protecting what's precious to her. Can't blame her for that." "Need to make sure they're healthy," Miles said. "Colt needs to be handled young if he's going to be properly trained." "May I go in?" Miles frowned. "She charged at two of my best hands. One ended up with a broken arm." "I'll be careful," Elena promised, already moving toward the gate. "Stay here. Too many people will make her more nervous." Before Miles could protest further, Elena slipped into the corral, closing the gate behind her. She stood still, making no move toward the mare, simply allowing her presence to be known. Duchess snorted, pawing the ground in warning. "I know," Elena said softly in Spanish. "You're being a good mother. No one will hurt your baby." The mare's ears flicked forward, catching the gentle tone. Elena slowly sat down in the dirt, making herself smaller, less threatening. This was the technique she'd used with Tempest when she first found him, wild and terrified in the mountains after a forest fire had driven him from his herd. Minutes passed. The mare gradually stopped pacing, though she remained alert, watching Elena with wary eyes. The foal, less cautious than its mother, took a tentative step forward, curious about the stranger. "Stay back, little one," Elena murmured. "Your mama needs to trust me first." From outside the corral, Miles watched in astonishment as Elena began to sing softly, a Spanish lullaby with a gentle, swaying melody. Her voice carried on the morning air, surprisingly rich and soothing. Duchess's posture slowly relaxed, her breathing becoming more regular. After what seemed like an eternity, Elena carefully extended her hand, palm up, and waited. The mare hesitated, then took a step forward, then another. Finally, Duchess stretched her neck out, nostrils flaring as she caught Elena's scent. The moment of truth. With delicate care, Duchess touched her muzzle to Elena's palm. "Well, I'll be damned," Miles whispered, gripping the corral fence tighter. Elena maintained the contact for a moment, then slowly rose to her feet. Speaking softly all the while, she approached the mare with measured steps. Duchess allowed her to stroke her neck, then check her flanks and legs. The foal, emboldened by its mother's acceptance, pranced over for attention. After thoroughly examining both animals, Elena returned to the gate where Miles waited, his expression a mixture of amazement and something else, something that might have been hope. "They're both healthy," she reported. "The colt's legs are strong, no sign of joint issues. Duchess has a small cut on her left hind leg, but it's healing clean. Should be fine." Miles opened the gate for her. "How did you do that?" Elena shrugged, brushing dust from her jeans. "Patience, respect, they can sense fear and aggression. I just showed her I wasn't a threat." "Just like that," Miles said, skepticism returning to his voice. "No," Elena corrected him gently. "It's never just like that. It's years of learning to read their signals, to speak their language. It's understanding that trust can't be demanded, only earned." The words hung between them, carrying weight beyond horses. Miles looked away first, his gaze traveling across his ranch, the fields that needed tending, the fences that needed mending, the horses that needed training. "We should talk terms," he said finally. "For your employment. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story." Elena followed Miles to the ranch house porch, where he gestured for her to take a seat in one of the weathered rocking chairs. He remained standing, leaning against the porch rail, seemingly more comfortable keeping some distance between them. "I can offer room and board, plus $70 a week," he said without preamble. "It's not much, but it's what I can manage right now." "That's fair," Elena replied. Money wasn't her primary concern. She needed stability more than wealth. "You'd be responsible for training the younger horses, gentling the wild ones we bring in, and helping with the breeding program." Miles looked out across the property. "Ranch hands handle the cattle and general work, but we're short-staffed there too. Everyone pitches in where needed." "I understand. I'm not afraid of hard work." Miles turned to study her. "Why here, Elena? Trading Post could have told you about bigger ranches. Better-paying ones." The question caught her off guard. She considered deflecting but decided on a partial truth instead. "They also said you were fair, that you judge people by their work, not their past or where they come from." Something flickered in Miles' eyes. "Everyone has a past." "Yes," she agreed quietly. "Not everyone gets a chance to build a future beyond it." Miles held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded once, as if coming to a decision. "Sunrise to sunset, 6 days a week. Sundays are yours, unless there's an emergency. Martha handles the cooking, but everyone cleans up after themselves." "When do I start?" "You already have." Miles straightened up from the rail. "We've got 24 Mustangs coming in tomorrow. Previous owner abandoned them when his ranch went under. They'll need evaluating, training if possible, or rehoming if not." The challenge in his voice was unmistakable. This would be her real test. "I'll be ready." "Good." Miles turned to go, then paused at the door. "That song you were singing to Duchess, what was it?" Elena smiled slightly. "A lullaby my mother used to sing. About finding your way home when you're lost." Miles nodded, his expression softening almost imperceptibly. "Dinner's at 6. Don't be late. Martha doesn't like food getting cold." As he disappeared into the house, Elena remained on the porch, watching as the morning activity of the ranch unfolded before her. Ranch hands moved between tasks, cattle grazed in distant fields, and horses roamed in the larger pastures. Despite its obvious struggles, there was something special about this place, something worth saving. For the first time in months, Elena allowed herself to feel a flicker of hope. Perhaps Cactus Ridge could become more than just another temporary stop on an endless journey. Perhaps, like Tempest, she too could find trust again after so much loss. Only time would tell. The first rays of morning sunlight spilled across Cactus Ridge Ranch, painting the desert landscape in shades of gold and amber. Elena had been awake for hours, sitting on the small porch of her cabin, watching the ranch come to life. In just a week, she had settled into the rhythm of this place. The early mornings, the long days of physical labor, the quiet evenings when exhaustion was a satisfying ache in her muscles. The Mustangs had arrived as Miles promised, 22 wild horses with fear in their eyes and resistance in their spirits. To the ranch hands' surprise, Elena had insisted on giving each one a name, not just a number. "Makes no sense naming them before we know which ones we're keeping," one of the older hands had grumbled. "They all deserve the dignity of a name," Elena had replied simply, ending the discussion. Now she rose from her seat, stretching muscles still stiff from yesterday's work. The youngest Mustang, a spirited filly she'd named Mariposa for the butterfly-shaped marking on her forehead, had been particularly challenging. But by sunset, the little horse had finally allowed Elena to touch her muzzle, a small victory that promised greater trust to come. Elena made her way to the main house, where the smell of coffee and bacon greeted her. The kitchen was already bustling with activity as ranch hands grabbed quick breakfasts before heading out to their duties. "Morning, Elena," Martha called from the stove. "You're up early, even for you." "Couldn't sleep," Elena admitted, pouring herself a cup of strong coffee. "Thought I'd get an early start with Mariposa." Martha smiled knowingly. "The little one's gotten under your skin, hasn't she?" "She reminds me of someone," Elena said softly. "You, perhaps?" Martha suggested, sliding a plate of eggs and bacon in front of her. Elena accepted the food with a grateful nod but didn't answer. In truth, the filly reminded her of herself years ago, wary, defensive, wanting connection but too afraid to trust. Before she could dwell on the thought, Miles entered the kitchen, his presence immediately filling the space. "Morning," he said, nodding to Elena as he reached for the coffee pot. "Thought I might find you here. We've got a situation with the north pasture fence. Storm damage worse than we thought. Need all hands today." "What about the Mustangs?" Elena asked. "They'll keep another day. Freeman and Torres can handle morning feed and water." Elena hesitated. Mariposa needs consistent work while she's starting to trust. "I could split my day. Fence in the morning, horses in the afternoon." Miles studied her over the rim of his coffee cup. After a week, Elena had learned to read his expressions, the slight narrowing of his eyes when he was considering a proposal, the almost imperceptible nod when he'd made a decision. "All right," he agreed. "But I need you at the fence first. Those Mustangs are your project, but this ranch has other priorities too." "Understood." The morning passed in a blur of physical labor. The fence damage was extensive, requiring new posts to be set and wire to be strung. Elena worked alongside the other hands, earning their grudging respect with her willingness to tackle the hardest tasks without complaint. Miles moved among them, directing the work but also doing his share, and more. Elena found herself watching him when he wasn't looking. For a man who carried such heaviness in his spirit, he moved with surprising grace. His hands, calloused and strong, worked the wire with practiced skill. By midday, the worst of the damage had been repaired. Elena's back ached, and her hands were raw despite her gloves, but there was satisfaction in seeing the fence standing strong again. "Good work today," Miles said as they gathered their tools. It was the closest thing to praise she'd heard from him, directed not just at her, but at all the workers. Still, his eyes lingered on her a moment longer than the others. "I'll head to the Mustang pen now," Elena said, wiping sweat from her brow. Miles nodded. "I'll come by later. Want to see how they're progressing." The Mustang enclosure was set apart from the main corrals, giving the wild horses space and separation from the ranch's regular activities. As Elena approached, she saw Freeman leaving, closing the gate behind him. "Fed and watered," he reported. "That little filly's still causing trouble. Won't let anyone near her." "She'll come around," Elena said confidently. Freeman shrugged. "Hope you're right. Boss is counting on getting at least 15 of these Mustangs trained well enough to sell. Ranch needs the money." The statement confirmed what Elena had suspected. Cactus Ridge was in financial trouble. She'd seen the signs: equipment patched instead of replaced, buildings in need of repair, fewer hands than a ranch this size required. Inside the enclosure, the Mustangs moved as a nervous herd, still unused to confinement. Elena stood quietly, allowing them to acknowledge her presence. Mariposa stood slightly apart, her delicate head held high, nostrils flaring as she caught Elena's scent. "Hello, little butterfly," Elena called softly. "Remember me?" For the next 3 hours, Elena worked patiently with the Mustangs, moving among them with quiet confidence. Some were more receptive than others, allowing her to approach, to touch them briefly. Mariposa remained elusive, watching from a distance, occasionally taking a step forward only to dance away again. Elena was so focused on her work that she didn't notice Miles until he spoke from the fence line. "You have a gift." She turned, surprised not just by his presence but by the unexpected compliment. He stood with his forearms resting on the top rail, watching her with an intensity that made her momentarily self-conscious. "Not a gift," she corrected, walking toward him. "Just patience and respect. Most people don't have either in abundance." Elena smiled slightly. "Is that a compliment, Mr. Blackwood?" An observation. But the corner of his mouth lifted in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "How's the butterfly doing?" "Stubborn. Scared. Smart." Elena glanced back at the filly. "She's testing me." "Testing your patience?" "Testing whether I mean what I say. Whether I can be trusted." Elena turned back to face him. "Trust isn't given, it's earned. Sometimes painfully." Something flickered in Miles' eyes. "Recognition, perhaps. Martha says you're skipping meals to spend time out here." Just lost track of time. Can't work if you don't eat. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a cloth-wrapped package. She sent this. Made me promise to make sure you ate it. Elena accepted the bundle, surprised by the gesture. Inside was a sandwich and an apple. Thank her for me. Miles nodded, still watching her with that unreadable expression. There's a town social on Saturday. Harvest celebration. Ranch hands usually get the evening off to attend. Elena took a bite of the sandwich to hide her surprise. Was this an invitation? I should stay with the Mustangs, she said finally. Consistency is important in the early stages of training. Even horse trainers need rest. Miles straightened up from the fence. Community's curious about you. Might be good to show your face. Before she could respond, he turned and walked away, leaving Elena to wonder at the exchange. Had that been concern for her welfare? A directive from her boss? Or something else entirely? The rest of the week passed in a blur of work and small victories. 2 of the older Mustangs now allowed halters, and 3 others approached Elena readily for grain. Mariposa remained cautious, but had progressed to eating from Elena's hand, a trembling trust that filled Elena with quiet joy. On Saturday morning, Martha appeared at the Mustang pen, hands on her hips. You planning to wear those dusty jeans to the social tonight? She demanded without preamble. Elena looked down at her work clothes, stained with dirt and horse sweat. I hadn't really decided if I'm going. Martha snorted. Of course you're going. Whole ranch is. Even Miles. Though he'd rather chew glass than admit he enjoys these gatherings. Elena hesitated. The thought of a crowd, of questions about her past, made her uneasy. But, after weeks of isolation before arriving at Cactus Ridge, perhaps some human connection would be welcome. I don't have anything suitable to wear, she admitted. Martha's expression softened. Thought that might be the case. Come by the house after lunch. I've got something that might work for you. That afternoon, Elena found herself in Martha's cozy bedroom, staring at her reflection in a full-length mirror. The dress Martha had loaned her was simple but lovely, a deep blue that brought out the warmth in her skin and made her dark eyes seem even more striking. It was my daughter's, Martha explained, adjusting the fit. She lives in Phoenix now, married a banker. Never wears anything this practical anymore. It's beautiful, Elena said softly. But I can't. You can and you will. Martha's tone brooked no argument. It's just gathering dust here. Besides, you'll be doing Miles a favor. Miles? How so? Martha's eyes twinkled mischievously. Man needs to remember there's more to life than work and worry. Seeing you in something other than those work clothes might just remind him. Elena felt her cheeks warm. Martha, it's not like that. He's my employer. MMHMM. The older woman didn't sound convinced. Just because a path starts one way doesn't mean it can't change direction. Before Elena could protest further, Martha was bustling her back to her cabin with the dress and stern instructions to do something nice with her hair. As twilight approached, Elena found herself putting more care into her appearance than she had in months. She washed her hair in the basin, letting it dry into its natural waves instead of braiding it back as usual. The dress fit perfectly, skimming her figure without being too formal for a country social. Outside, wagon wheels crunched on gravel as the ranch hands prepared to leave for town. Elena took a deep breath and stepped out of her cabin. The conversations around the wagons quieted as she approached. She felt self-conscious under the surprised stares of men who had only seen her in work clothes, her hair tied back, her manner all business. Well, don't you clean up nice, Freeman said. Appreciatively, quickly adding, Ma'am, when he caught Miles' sharp glance. Miles himself stood by the lead wagon, and for a moment, Elena couldn't read his expression as he looked at her. Then something softened in his eyes. Blue suits you, he said simply, offering his hand to help her into the wagon. The touch of his palm against hers sent an unexpected warmth through her fingers. She settled onto the wagon seat beside him, suddenly aware of his closeness in a way she hadn't been during their workdays side by side. The town of Copper Canyon was small but bustling, especially tonight. Lanterns and strings of lights illuminated the town square, where tables had been set up around a cleared space for dancing. A small band played lively tunes, and the air was filled with the scent of good food and the sound of laughter. As they arrived, Elena felt the curious stares of townspeople. Clearly, a new face was a novelty, especially one arriving with the usually solitary Miles Blackwood. "Miles, you made it!" A round, cheerful woman approached them as they stepped down from the wagon. "And who's this lovely young lady?" "Mrs. Peterson. This is Elena Diaz, our new horse trainer," Miles introduced. "Elena, Maggie Peterson. She runs the general store and knows everything about everyone." "Not everything," Mrs. Peterson said with a laugh. "For instance, I don't know where Miss Diaz came from or how she convinced our most stubborn rancher to hire her." Elena smiled politely. "I let my work speak for itself." "Well, it must speak eloquently, indeed." "Miles hasn't hired anyone new since." She stopped abruptly, glancing at Miles. "Well, it's wonderful to meet you, dear. Come, let me introduce you around." Before Elena could protest, Mrs. Peterson was steering her through the crowd, making introductions at a dizzying pace. Everyone was polite, welcoming in that careful way small communities have with strangers. Friendly but reserved. Accepting, but watchful. Through it all, Elena was aware of Miles moving through the crowd at his own pace, exchanging brief greetings with neighbors, accepting a plate of food, declining offers to dance. Unlike Elena, he seemed to know exactly how to navigate these social waters without getting pulled into lengthy conversations. "Your boss isn't much for socializing," Mrs. Peterson observed, following Elena's gaze. "Not since losing Daniel. Those two were inseparable. Different as could be, but devoted." "Martha mentioned the accident," Elena said cautiously. Mrs. Peterson lowered her voice. "Terrible business. Miles was there when it happened. Couldn't get to him in time. Blamed himself, though everyone knows a spooked horse is nobody's fault." She sighed. "Ranch hasn't been the same since. Neither has Miles." Before Elena could respond, the band struck up a new, livelier tune. Couples moved to the dance area, and the mood lightened. "You should get some food before the best dishes are gone," Mrs. Peterson advised. Sadie Thompson's apple pie won the county fair 3 years running. Grateful for the change of subject, Elena made her way to the food tables. She filled a plate with fried chicken, cornbread, and fresh vegetables, suddenly realizing how hungry she was after a day's work. She found a quiet spot at the edge of the celebration to eat, content to observe the community around her. Children chased each other between tables. Older couples swayed to the music. Young men and women engaged in the timeless dance of courtship. Not much for crowds? Elena looked up to find Miles standing beside her, his own plate in hand. "Just taking it all in," she replied. "It's been a while since I've been to something like this." He sat down beside her on the bench. Small towns can be overwhelming in their own way. Everyone wants to know your business. "I noticed. Mrs. Peterson has already tried to extract my life story twice." A flicker of amusement crossed Miles' face. "Maggie means well. Curiosity's her natural state." They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes, watching the dancers. The band shifted to a slower tune, a sweet, wistful melody that seemed to fill the night air with nostalgia. "Your Mustangs are coming along," Miles said finally. "Even that stubborn filly." "Mariposa just needs time," Elena said. "Some souls take longer to trust than others." Miles turned to look at her directly. "Where did you learn to handle horses like that?" "Your father, you said." "But there's more to it." Elena hesitated. The question strayed closer to her past than she was comfortable sharing, yet something about the moment, the music, the lights, the rare sense of safety she felt at Cactus Ridge, made her want to offer at least a partial truth. "I grew up on a ranch in New Mexico," she said quietly. "My father raised quarter horses, My mother died when I was young, so it was just the two of us. He taught me everything about horses, said I had a natural way with them. He was right about that. He died 5 years ago. The ranch was in debt. I couldn't keep it. The familiar pain surfaced, duller now but still present. I've been working different places since then, never staying too long. Miles nodded, understanding in his eyes. Loss changes the landscape. Nothing looks the same after. The simple truth of his words touched something in Elena. No, it doesn't. The music swelled around them, and impulsively, Miles set down his plate and stood. Would you like to dance, Elena? Surprised, she looked up at him. In the lantern light, his features seemed softer, the habitual sternness replaced by something warm and almost vulnerable. I'd like that, she said, placing her hand in his outstretched one. He led her to the edge of the dancing area, his hand warm and steady against her back as they began to move to the music. For a man who spent his days on horseback, Miles danced with surprising grace. Elena found herself relaxing into his lead, enjoying the simple pleasure of movement and music. You dance well, she observed. Daniel insisted we both learn properly. Said no woman would look twice at a man who couldn't dance. A shadow of sadness crossed his face at the mention of his brother, but it was accompanied by a fond smile. He was usually right about such things. As they turned, Elena caught sight of Martha watching them, a satisfied smile on her face. Several other townspeople had noticed as well, exchanging meaningful glances. We're causing a stir, Elena murmured. Small towns, Miles said with a slight shrug. Been a while since I've danced with anyone. The admission hung between them, simple but weighted with meaning. As the song ended, Miles' hand lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary before he stepped back. Thank you, he said formally, though his eyes conveyed something less formal. My pleasure, Elena replied, meaning it. The rest of the evening passed in a pleasant blur. Elena danced with several ranch hands, each careful to be respectful under Miles' watchful eye. She sampled Mrs. Thompson's famous apple pie, which lived up to its reputation. She listened to stories about the town's history, about the copper mines that had once been its lifeblood, about the drought 3 years ago that had nearly destroyed the ranching community. Through it all, she was aware of Miles, his position in the crowd, the rare sound of his laughter when an old friend told a joke, the way his eyes sought her out periodically as if checking that she was enjoying herself. It was nearly midnight when they began the journey back to the ranch. The night had turned cool, and Miles draped a blanket over Elena's shoulders as they sat side by side in the wagon. Thank you for insisting I come tonight, she said as the lights of the town receded behind them. It was lovely. Town needed to meet you properly, Miles replied. People get nervous about strangers. And now? Now you're not quite as strange. There was that almost smile again. Though Maggie Peterson is still desperate to know where you came from and why you're here, Elena laughed softly. I'm afraid I disappointed her on both counts. Miles was quiet for a moment, the only sounds the creak of wagon wheels and the steady rhythm of the horses' hooves on the dusty road. You don't have to tell me, he said finally. Your past is your own. But if there's trouble following you, Elena, this ranch can't afford any more hardship. The words were gentle but direct, reminding her that for all the warmth of the evening, Miles was still her employer, still responsible for Cactus Ridge and everyone on it. There's no trouble, she assured him. Just ghosts. He nodded, seeming to understand. Ghosts we can handle. Got plenty of our own. The moon was high and bright by the time they reached the ranch, casting the buildings in silver light. The other wagons had arrived ahead of them, and the ranch was settling into nighttime quiet. Miles walked Elena to her cabin, their footsteps crunching on the gravel path. At her door, she turned to thank him again for the evening. You brought something to the social tonight, he said before she could speak. Something that's been missing. What's that? Life. The word was simple but held a depth of meaning in his voice. Been a long time since this ranch had any. Before she could respond, he reached out slowly, as if approaching one of her wild mustangs, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The touch was fleeting but sent warmth cascading through her. "Good night, Elena," he said, his voice low. "Good night, Miles." Inside her cabin, Elena stood for a long moment in the darkness, her heart beating a rhythm unfamiliar yet somehow inevitable. Outside her window, she could see Miles walking toward the main house, his figure strong against the moonlit landscape. Something was changing at Cactus Ridge Ranch, something unexpected and perhaps dangerous for a woman who had learned the hard way that permanence was an illusion, that connections led to heartbreak, that running was safer than staying. Yet as she prepared for bed, Elena found herself hoping, for the first time in years, that this place might be different. That here, among the mustangs and the desert blooms and the man with sadness in his eyes, she might finally stop running. Morning came too soon, the sunlight streaming through Elena's window rousing her from dreams she couldn't quite remember, but that left her with a sense of peace. Sunday, her day off. Yet she found herself dressing quickly, eager to check on the mustangs, particularly Mariposa. The ranch was quiet, most hands taking advantage of their free day to sleep late or head back into town. Elena made her way to the Mustang pen, enjoying the stillness of early morning. Inside the enclosure, the horses were calm, some still drowsing in the growing warmth. Mariposa raised her head as Elena entered, ears pricked forward in recognition. "Good morning, Butterfly," Elena called softly. To her surprise, the filly took several steps toward her, hesitant but purposeful. Elena stood perfectly still, hardly daring to breathe. Another step, then another. Finally, Mariposa was close enough that Elena could feel her warm breath. Slowly, giving the filly every chance to retreat, Elena raised her hand. Mariposa sniffed it cautiously, then, in a moment that made Elena's heart swell, pressed her muzzle against Elena's palm. "Well done," came Miles' voice from behind her. "You've earned her trust." Elena turned to see him leaning against the fence, watching them with approval in his eyes. In the clear morning light, with his guard lowered, he looked younger, the weight of responsibility temporarily lifted from his shoulders. "It's a beginning," Elena said, gently stroking Mariposa's neck as the filly allowed it. "Trust is built in small moments, over time." Miles opened the gate and entered the pen, moving with quiet confidence. The other mustangs shifted but didn't panic at his presence. He approached Elena and Mariposa slowly, respecting the fragile connection. "May I?" he asked, holding out his hand. Elena nodded and Miles extended his hand toward the filly. Mariposa sniffed cautiously, then, remarkably, allowed him to touch her muzzle. "She trusts you," Miles observed, "so she's willing to trust me too." The simple statement carried a weight beyond the moment, beyond the Mustang pen. Elena felt it settle between them, a truth neither was quite ready to acknowledge. "It's your day off," Miles said, changing the subject. "Thought you'd sleep in." "Couldn't," Elena admitted. "Wanted to see how they were doing." Miles nodded understanding. "Martha's making a special breakfast. Asked me to invite you if you're up." The invitation was casual, but represented another small barrier falling between them. Sunday breakfast at the main house was typically Miles' private time, Martha had told her. "I'd like that," Elena said. As they walked together toward the house, the morning sun warming their shoulders, Elena felt a sense of rightness she hadn't experienced in years. The road ahead was still uncertain, the ghosts of her past not fully laid to rest, but for now, in this moment, Cactus Ridge felt like a place she could belong. And the man walking beside her, with his quiet strength and carefully guarded heart, felt increasingly like someone she could trust with her own. The October sun cast long shadows across Cactus Ridge Ranch as Elena guided Mariposa through her first session with a saddle blanket. The filly danced nervously, eyes wide, but no longer bolted at new experiences. 8 weeks had transformed both the Mustang and the ranch. Under Elena's guidance, 17 of the wild horses were now halter-trained. With 5 already accepting riders, Miles had sold 3 to neighboring ranches for a handsome profit, bringing much-needed income. "Easy, Butterfly," Elena murmured, running her hand along Mariposa's neck. "Nothing to fear." From the fence line, Miles watched with undisguised admiration. Their silent audience had become a familiar routine, Elena working with the horses while Miles observed, offering occasional suggestions, but mostly content to witness the near-magical connection between woman and animal. "She's ready for the saddle next week," Elena called over her shoulder. No rush, Miles replied. Some things can't be hurried. Elena smiled at the double meaning in his words. Since the night of the town social, something had shifted between them, a careful dance of growing closeness without acknowledgement. They shared meals more often, lingered in conversation on the porch after dinner, worked side by side with a comfortable familiarity that hadn't existed before. Yet neither had taken the step to define what was happening, as if naming it might break its fragile spell. Elena removed the blanket from Mariposa's back and rewarded her with an apple slice. The filly's trust was complete now, a transformation that still filled Elena with wonder. When she'd first arrived at Cactus Ridge, she hadn't expected to stay this long. Hadn't expected to care so much about the ranch, the horses, the gruff man who was slowly revealing the heart beneath his guarded exterior. Got a letter today, Miles said as Elena led Mariposa back to the corral. From a breeder in Santa Fe, heard about our Mustang program. Wants to come see for himself. That's wonderful, Elena said, securing the gate. When? Next week, Thursday. Miles hesitated. If he likes what he sees, could mean a contract for 10 trained horses. Maybe more. The unspoken significance hung between them. A contract of that size would secure Cactus Ridge's finances for months, perhaps turn the tide of the ranch's fortunes entirely. We'll be ready, Elena promised. The bay gelding and the 2 sorrels are almost fully trained. Mariposa will charm him even without a saddle. Miles nodded, but something in his expression remained troubled. This could change things for the ranch. Isn't that what you want? Yes. He met her gaze directly. But change isn't always simple. Before she could ask what he meant, one of the ranch hands approached at a gallop, dust billowing behind his horse. Boss! Cattle broke through the south fence, moving into Thompson's alfalfa fields. Miles was immediately alert. How many? 30, maybe more. Already sent Freeman and Torres to head them off, but we need more riders. I'll come, Elena said, already moving toward the stables. Miles nodded. Saddle Tempest. He's fastest. I'll meet you at the south gate in 5 minutes. They rode hard toward the southern boundary of the ranch, where a creek separated Cactus Ridge from the neighboring Thompson property. Elena felt Tempest's power beneath her, the stallion eating up the distance with long, ground-covering strides. Despite the urgency, she couldn't help but exult in the feeling of freedom, of partnership with the magnificent animal who had brought her to this place. They crested a hill and saw the situation below. Cattle scattered across Thompson's alfalfa field, already gorging themselves on the rich crop. Freeman and Torres were attempting to gather them, but the cattle, having discovered such delicious bounty, were reluctant to be moved. This could get expensive, Miles muttered. That alfalfa's worth good money. They rode down to join the other hands, Miles already calling out directions. Elena marveled at how quickly he assessed the situation and formulated a plan. Elena, take the east side. Keep them from pushing further into the field. Torres, ride the perimeter and find the breach in the fence. Freeman, with me. We'll push from the south. They separated, each to their assigned position. Elena guided Tempest to the eastern edge of the scattered herd, using his imposing presence to begin turning the cattle. The animals were stubborn, but Elena and Tempest worked as one, anticipating movements, blocking escape routes, gradually pushing the herd toward the creek crossing. From across the field, she caught glimpses of Miles doing the same, his tall figure confident in the saddle, his commands clear and assured. This was his element, she realized. For all his brooding silence around the ranch house, here in the open, engaged in the work he'd been born to, Miles Blackwood was transformed. After an hour of coordinated effort, they had the cattle gathered and moving back toward Cactus Ridge land. Torres had located the fence breach. A fallen tree had crushed a section during last night's windstorm. As they drove the cattle through the creek crossing, Saul Thompson rode up, his expression somewhere between amusement and irritation. "Your beast's developing a taste for gourmet feed, Blackwood?" he called. Miles dismounted to speak with his neighbor. "Sorry about this, Saul." Tree took down the fence in the night. Thompson, a weather-beaten man in his 60s, waved off the apology. "No lasting harm done. Caught it before they ate me into bankruptcy." "I'll make it right," Miles insisted. "Send me a bill for the damaged crop." Thompson's gaze shifted to Elena, who had dismounted nearby. This must be the horse trainer I've been hearing about, the one turning wild Mustangs into gold. Miles made the introduction. Elena Diaz, Saul Thompson, owns the next spread over. Pleasure, Elena said, extending her hand. Thompson shook it, studying her with open curiosity. Heard you've got quite a way with horses. Miles here never could resist a good horse trainer. His eyes twinkled with mischief. Or a pretty one. Miles cleared his throat. We should get these cattle secured before they find another field to invade. Thompson laughed. Don't let me keep you, but bring Miss Diaz to dinner sometime. Marion would love to meet her. As they rode back to the ranch, the cattle now safely ahead of them, Elena glanced at Miles. His expression was unreadable in the fading afternoon light. He seems nice, she ventured. Mr. Thompson. Known him 30 years, Miles replied. Good neighbor. Talks too much. Elena smiled at the dry assessment. He cares about you. Miles was quiet for a long moment, the only sound the rhythmic thud of hooves and the occasional lowing of cattle. People around here, they worry, he finally said. After Daniel died, I wasn't in a good place. Saul and Marion, they tried to help. Everyone did. I wasn't particularly gracious about it. The admission revealed more than just the words themselves. Elena could imagine Miles after his loss, retreating into himself, rejecting offers of support, determined to bear his grief alone. Grief makes strangers of us all, she said softly, even to ourselves. Miles looked at her then, really looked at her, as if seeing something new. Yes, he agreed quietly, it does. They rode the rest of the way in companionable silence, the shared understanding between them deeper than any conversation could express. That night, after the cattle were secured and the fence temporarily repaired, Elena sat on her cabin porch watching the stars emerge. The day's exertion had left her pleasantly tired, but her mind was too active for sleep. She was still there when Miles approached, 2 steaming mugs in his hands. Thought you might want some coffee, he said, offering her one of the mugs. It's cooling down tonight. Thank you. She accepted the drink gratefully, the warmth seeping into her hands. Beautiful night. Miles settled into the other chair, stretching his long legs before him. Used to drive Daniel crazy how I could always find Orion but nothing else. Elena smiled, looking up at the constellation now visible in the autumn sky. My father taught me the stars, said a horseman needs to navigate by them sometimes. Smart man. Yes, he was. Elena's voice softened with memory. He would have liked it here. The openness, the honesty of the place. Miles took a sip of his coffee. You never talk about why you left New Mexico, after your father died and you lost the ranch. It wasn't quite a question, but the invitation to share was clear. Elena stared into her coffee, considering how much to reveal. The night felt safe somehow, the darkness a blanket that made truth easier to speak. The ranch was in debt when he died. I tried to keep it going, but the bank foreclosed. The familiar pain surfaced, duller now with time. A man named James Harrington bought it, said he wanted to maintain it as a working ranch, offered me a position as trainer. Miles waited, sensing there was more to the story. He had other interests. Elena continued carefully. When I made it clear those interests weren't reciprocated, the job offer disappeared. But his attention didn't. She took a steadying breath. He was powerful in the county, made it difficult for me to find work elsewhere, suggested he could solve all my problems if I would just be more accommodating. Miles, hand tightened around his mug. I'm sorry. I left one night with what I could carry. Tempest was the only thing of value I took. He'd been my father's pride. Harrington sent men looking for me, claiming I'd stolen the horse. A mirthless smile touched her lips. Technically, I suppose I did. The bank had seized everything. That's why you were so cautious when you arrived here, Miles said, understanding dawning in his voice. Why you didn't share your past. Elena nodded. I've been moving place to place since then, never staying long enough to be found, never allowing myself to... She trailed off. To care? Miles finished for her. Yes. She finally looked at him directly. Until now. The simple admission hung in the air between them. More significant than any declaration of feeling might have been, Miles set his mug down and leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. Harrington has no claim on you or Tempest, not legally, not morally, and he has no reach here. I know that now, Elena said, but habits of caution are hard to break. Trust is built in small moments, Miles said, echoing her own words back to her. Over time. The reference brought a genuine smile to her face. So it is. They finished their coffee in comfortable silence, the night wrapping around them like a shared secret. When Miles finally rose to leave, he paused beside her chair. The Santa Fe breeder, he said. If it goes well, the ranch will be on firmer ground, might be able to expand the breeding program. Would need someone to run it properly. Elena looked up at him, understanding the unspoken offer. Someone who knows horses. Someone who belongs here? His voice was low, intimate in the darkness. If she wanted to stay. Before she could respond, he was gone, his footsteps fading into the night, leaving Elena with a fluttering hope in her chest that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. The day of the Santa Fe breeder's visit dawned clear and cool, perfect weather for showcasing the Mustangs. Elena had been up since before sunrise, ensuring every horse was groomed to perfection, every piece of tack polished, every detail attended to. This opportunity meant everything to Cactus Ridge, to Miles. You've done more than enough, Martha said, finding Elena adjusting Mariposa's halter for the third time. Those horses couldn't look better if they were headed to the White House. Elena smiled nervously. I just want everything to be perfect. It will be, Martha assured her. Because of you. The breeder, Harold Wilkins, arrived precisely at 10 o'clock. A portly man with shrewd eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Miles met him at the main house, then brought him to the training pen where Elena waited with the Mustangs. Mr. Wilkins, this is Elena Diaz, our head trainer, Miles introduced. She's the one who developed our Mustang program. Elena shook the man's hand, noting the surprised lift of his eyebrows. Whether at her gender or her youth, she wasn't sure. Miles tells me you've accomplished the impossible, Wilkins said. Turned wild horses into reliable mounts in less than 2 months. With the right approach, Mustangs can be the most loyal, hard-working partners imaginable, Elena replied. They just need someone to speak their language. Wilkins harumphed, clearly reserving judgment. Show me. For the next 2 hours, Elena demonstrated the progress of each Mustang, starting with the most advanced and working down to those still in early training. She explained her methods as she worked, showing how she built trust before demanding performance, how she used positive reinforcement rather than fear. Wilkins watched with increasing interest, occasionally asking sharp questions that revealed his expertise. When Elena had Freeman ride one of the geldings through a series of maneuvers, the breeder nodded approvingly. Impressive responsiveness, he acknowledged. Gentle mouth. Finally, Elena brought out Mariposa. The filly had progressed remarkably, but was still not saddle-trained. This one's special, Elena explained. She's younger than the others, with exceptional intelligence and spirit. Too small for serious work, Wilkins observed, but perfect for a youth program. Elena countered. Imagine children learning horsemanship on Mustangs they helped train themselves. Building confidence, responsibility, partnership. Wilkins raised an eyebrow. Youth program? Miles stepped forward. An idea we're developing. Bringing local kids to work with the gentler Mustangs. Community outreach. It was the first Elena had heard of such a plan, but she immediately understood its value, both to the community and to the Mustangs who needed homes. Interesting concept, Wilkins admitted. Might generate good publicity too. By the end of the demonstration, even the skeptical breeder was impressed. Over lunch in the main house, he and Miles began discussing terms for an initial purchase of 8 horses, with the possibility of ongoing business if the animals performed as promised. Your Miss Diaz is quite the find, Wilkins remarked as they walked back to his car. Several breeding operations in Santa Fe would pay handsomely for her expertise. A shadow crossed Miles' face, Elena's position here is secure as long as she wants it. Wilkins smiled knowingly. I imagine so. After the breeder departed, a palpable sense of celebration swept through the ranch. The contract was the best financial news Cactus Ridge had received in years. Miles gathered the hands to announce that everyone would receive a bonus from the proceeds, and Martha declared a special dinner was in order. In the commotion, Elena slipped away to the Mustang pen, needing a moment to process everything. She found Mariposa waiting at the fence, ears pricked forward in greeting. "We did it, Butterfly," she whispered, stroking the filly's velvet muzzle. "You were perfect." "So were you." Elena turned to find Miles standing a few feet away, his expression more open than she'd ever seen it. "We all were," she demurred. "It was a team effort." "Elena." He stepped closer. "The contract. The youth program idea. None of it would have happened without you. You've brought something back to this ranch that I thought was gone forever." "What's that?" "Purpose. Hope." He looked around at the ranch, his gaze taking in the buildings, the land, before returning to her. A future. The words hung between them, weighted with meaning beyond the successful business deal. Elena felt her heart quickening, aware that they were standing at the edge of something momentous. "I meant what I said to Wilkins," Miles continued. "Your position here is secure. But I need to know if you want it, if you're planning to stay." Elena thought of the months she'd spent at Cactus Ridge, the sense of belonging that had grown with each passing day. She thought of Mariposa and the other Mustangs, of Martha's kindness, of the community that had gradually accepted her. And she thought of Miles, the man who had taken a chance on a stranger with a wild horse, who had respected her work, who had slowly revealed his wounded heart to her. "I want to stay," she said softly. Relief and something deeper washed over his features. He took another step toward her, close enough now that she could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. "Good," he said simply. "Because I don't think I could run this place without you anymore." The admission cost him, she could tell. Miles Blackwood was not a man who easily acknowledged need or dependence. "The Mustangs would miss me," she teased gently, giving him space to retreat if the moment became too intense. Instead, he smiled, a real smile that transformed his face. "The Mustangs, right." They stood in companionable silence, the autumn sun warming their shoulders, the promise of something new unfolding between them like a desert flower after rain. That evening, the celebration dinner was joyous. Martha had outdone herself with a feast that had the ranch hands groaning with satisfaction. Even Miles seemed lighter, laughing at Freeman's jokes, joining in the general mood of optimism. As the meal wound down, he stood and cleared his throat. The table quieted immediately. "Today marks a turning point for Cactus Ridge," he began. "The Mustang program has exceeded all expectations, thanks to Elena's expertise and all your hard work." Murmurs of agreement circled the table. "The contract with Wilkins is just the beginning. I've been thinking about expanding, not just the horse breeding, but the youth program Elena and I discussed, bringing in local kids, teaching them horsemanship, responsibility." Elena listened with growing surprise and admiration. This was a side of Miles she'd glimpsed only rarely, the visionary who could see beyond immediate concerns to build something meaningful. "It would mean changes," he continued. "New facilities, maybe additional staff, but it would secure Cactus Ridge's future in a way that honors what this place has always been about." "What's that, boss?" one of the younger hands asked. "Miles." Gaze found Elena's across the table. "Second chances, for horses and for people." The words resonated deeply with everyone present. Each person at the table had their own story, their own reason for finding themselves at this remote ranch in the Arizona desert. After dinner, as the hands drifted away to their evening pursuits, Miles asked Elena to walk with him. They strolled toward the stables in the gathering twilight, close but not touching. "Did you mean it?" Elena asked. "About the youth program?" "Every word," Miles confirmed. "Watching you with the Mustangs, seeing how you build trust, how you communicate without words, it made me realize we have something valuable to share, something that could make a difference." "It's a beautiful vision." They reached the corral where Tempest and Mariposa were kept. The two horses approached the fence, curious about their late visitors. "There's something else," Miles said, his voice taking on a new seriousness. "Something I need to tell you." Elena turned to face him, sensing the importance of the moment. After Daniel died, I shut down, closed myself off, focused on just keeping the ranch afloat, day to day, nothing more. He ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of uncertainty. I didn't want to care about anything that could be lost. I understand that feeling, Elena said softly. I know you do. His eyes held hers in the fading light. Maybe that's why, when you showed up with Tempest that day, something in me recognized something in you. Elena's heart quickened. Two wounded souls. Yes. Miles took a deep breath. What I'm trying to say, not very well, is that you've changed things, Elena. Changed the ranch. Changed me. He reached for her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. I don't want you to stay just as my horse trainer. I want you to stay because this is your home now. Because you belong here. With the Mustangs. With me. The simple declaration, spoken in Miles' straightforward way, moved Elena more than any elaborate profession of love could have. She looked at their joined hands, then up at his face, the face that had become so dear to her. When I arrived here, she said, I was still running, still afraid. I didn't believe I could ever stop, ever feel safe again. And now? Now I know that safety isn't about a place, it's about trust. She stepped closer to him. You told me to stay if Tempest trusted me. But the truth is, I stayed because I learned to trust you. Miles' free hand came up to touch her cheek, his touch reverent. Elena? He whispered, her name a question and an answer all at once. When their lips met, it felt like coming home after a long journey. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, then deepening with shared emotion and unspoken promises. Around them, the ranch settled into evening quiet, the stars emerging one by one in the vast Arizona sky. Later, as they walked hand in hand back toward the main house, Elena thought about the journey that had brought her here, the losses, the hardships, the moments of despair. None of it seemed wasted now. Each step, even the painful ones, had led her to this place, this man, this chance to build something lasting. At the porch steps, Miles paused, looking out over the ranch that had been his burden and was now becoming his joy again. Daniel used to say that a ranch isn't just land and livestock, he mused. It's a living thing. It needs heart to survive. He was right, Elena said, following his gaze to the peaceful scene before them. The building silvered by moonlight, the horses grazing in the near pasture, the distant mountains standing guard. Cactus Ridge has heart again. Miles turned to her, his expression solemn yet filled with quiet happiness. Because of you. Elena shook her head. Because we both stopped running long enough to find what we were really looking for. And what was that? He asked, though his eyes suggested he already knew the answer. Someone who understands that trust, once broken, can be rebuilt. That wounded hearts can heal. That love, real love, isn't about possession. It's about partnership. She smiled up at him. Like a woman and a wild horse, learning to move together in perfect harmony. Miles, answering smile, was like sunrise breaking over the desert. Stay, he whispered, echoing the words he'd spoken on her first day at Cactus Ridge. Not because your horse trusts me, but because you do. I'm not going anywhere, Elena promised, sealing her words with another kiss. Above them, the stars of Orion watched over Cactus Ridge Ranch, where two people who had learned the hard language of loss were now speaking the tender dialect of new beginnings. And in the nearby corral, a once wild Mustang named Tempest stood guard over his companion, a delicate filly called Mariposa, both of them home at last. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.